بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. All praises for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may His prayers and blessings be upon His final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and all those who follow in his guidance and footsteps until the day of judgment. Obviously, after the introduction of Brother Abu Na'im, it's obvious that I won't be speaking about external enemies. The focus of this series is the internal enemies and the internal war that wages throughout our life, from the day we are born until the day we die. And this is the nature of this world, that we are in a constant struggle and we are in a constant battle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ, that we have created man in turmoil. We have created man in struggle, in hardship. And that's the nature of this world. And it is this ongoing battle that occurs that truly sifts the pure from the impure, and that separates from the believers and the liars. And it is this ongoing battle that will ultimately determine whether we are truly worthy of the ultimate prize, that is Jannah. One of the Salaf outlined these enemies, and this is not to say that these are the only enemies that we encounter in this world. Now, the believer has more than 3 enemies, and some of them are mentioned in the Quran and some of them are mentioned in the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ mentions that you are upon the religion of your companions. And unfortunately for some people, they accompany their enemy, because their companions are devils from mankind. And if your friends are devils from mankind, they are not your friends. They are your enemies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points out that the hypocrites are your enemies. هُمُ الْعَدُوُّ فَاحْذَرْهُمْ, they are the enemy, be cautious, beware of them. But today we will not be speaking about the hypocrites, we will not be speaking about America, and we will not be speaking about your companions and your friends. Our concentration is on the 3 main enemies that we have as humans. War is waged on us as Muslims on 3 fronts. And that is through the shaitan, through the dunya, and through your soul. That part of the soul that inclines towards evil. One of the Salafi says, أعداء الإنسان ثلاثة شيطانه ودنياه ونفسه. The enemy of the human is 3. The devil, his evil inclining soul, and the dunya. He then says, فاحترس من الدنيا بالزهد ومن الشيطان بمخالفته ومن النفس بترك الشهوات. Seek protection from the dunya by way of zuhud. Zuhud is removing the dunya from your heart. The money may be in your hand, but it does not have a place in your heart. That is zuhud. Protect yourself from the dunya through zuhud. Protect yourself from the shaitan by disobeying him and not falling victim to his commands. And protect yourself from your soul by not succumbing to its desires. And these are the 3 enemies that we plan on speaking about. So the first of these is the shaitan, and he is no doubt the leader of these enemies. And he is no doubt the ultimate enemy of every human. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the Quran. And he reminds Adam and Hawa, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمَا عَدُوٌ مُبِينٌ. And Musa alayhi salam, he says, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ عَدُوٌ مُضِلٌّ مُبِينٌ. That the shaitan, he's firstly your enemy. He's firstly your enemy. And then two descriptions are given to this enemy. The first is that mudil. The shaitan's objective is to misguide. The shaitan's objective is to deviate the human from the straight path. And then he follows this with a very interesting description. That he is mubin. And what this means is that he is a clear and obvious enemy. He is a clear and obvious enemy. And it's strange that the shaitan being a clear and obvious enemy, that we still fall prey to this shaitan, despite this reality. You know, it's understandable for a person to be fooled by a hidden enemy, by an enemy he cannot see coming. But to take an obvious enemy as a friend and listen to him, that's indeed something strange. You know, can you imagine a person fighting you, waging war against you? He's got a gun against your head. And you're saying, no, he's still my friend. No, he still doesn't mean me any harm. You think the person's crazy. The shaitan likewise, he's an obvious enemy. There's no secret behind his enmity towards you and me. And despite this, people still fall victim. And the shaitan wages his war against every human from the moment he is born. From the moment you were born, the shaitan has declared war against you. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَا مِن مَوْلُودٍ إِلَّا وَيَسْتَهِلُّ صَارِخًا. And there's no one that comes into this world. There's no newborn that comes except that he comes crying. Have you ever seen a child coming smiling or laughing? Always a child comes crying, screaming. Why is the child come into this world screaming and crying? The Prophet ﷺ, he continues, he says, ذَلِكَ أَنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ مَسَّهُ إِلَّا مَرْيَمَ وَابْنَهَا. That is because shaitan has touched him, he has pricked him or her, except for Maryam and her child. From the moment you come out, the shaitan has pricked you, he's declared war against you. He doesn't wait for you to become older, he doesn't wait for you to mature. He doesn't wait for your senses to mature, for your brain and intelligence to mature. He's already declared war the moment you were born. The moment you were born. And this enmity, this war that the shaitan wages is on all fronts. He uses everything at his disposal in order to misguide, in order to deviate. Any tool that he has, any trick that he has, any ally that he has, he uses them all in order to misguide, in order to deviate. And this is what is expected from an enemy anyhow. This is what is expected from an enemy. You know, when the shaitan defied Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he refused to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam out of pride and arrogance, he made a request to Allah. He made a request to Allah. قَالَ أَنظِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. He made a request, "Oh my Lord, give me respite, extend my life until the day they are resurrected." He is speaking about whom? Speaking about Adam and his progeny. Adam and humankind. Give me respite until the day they are all resurrected. And Allah gave him his request. قَالَ إِنَّكَ مِنَ الْمُنظَرِينَ. He said, you are one who has been given respite. You are one whose life has been extended. The shaitan then exposes his envy and jealousy. And he says, فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. He said, because you led me astray. He's accusing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of leading him astray. Because you cursed me. Because you expelled me from Jannah, I will lead them all astray. And I will sit on the path of Islam. I will sit on the straight path in order to misguide them. On what path did Shaitan promise to sit? On the path of righteousness. On the straight path. He didn't say, I will sit on the path of misguidance and I will encourage those who were misguided to go further in their misguidance. No. He said, the path that I will be sitting on is the path of righteousness, is the straight path. And that's because Shaitan is not concerned about the one who is already misguided. He is concerned about the one who is guided. If a person falls into zina, the Shaitan's not going to come, he's going to say, aren't you ashamed? You fell into the haram. Don't you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He doesn't care. You fell into the zina. You're already his victim. You've already fallen to his trap. What he is worried about, his concern are those who are truly guided. Those who are trying to take the path of guidance. Those who are trying to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's his concern. And that's why he promised to sit on that path. On that path. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us that the Shaitan has taken on every path that the believer takes. And he's sitting there waiting and trying to misguide. Before he embraces Islam, the Shaitan comes to him, he says, how can you give up the religion of your forefathers? Don't you know what it means when you embrace Islam? Don't you know that Islam has commandments, prohibitions? Don't you know you have to leave this and you have to leave that if you embrace Islam? When that person ignores those calls of Shaitan and he embraces Islam, the Shaitan doesn't stop there. When that person makes the intention to migrate, the Shaitan is there. How dare you leave the land of your fathers, the land where you were born? If the person disobeys Shaitan and he migrates, the Shaitan doesn't stop. He says, why are you to go to jihad when he makes a decision to go and fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Don't you know what this means? Don't you know this may lead to your death? Don't you know this requires you to leave your family, to leave your loved ones? If he defies Shaitan and he takes on that path, the Shaitan continues. And it's a never-ending battle. When you make the intention of Hajj, he's there. You still got bills. You've got a mortgage. You've got a family to take care of. Don't worry about Hajj. Don't worry. You can do Hajj when you're older, when you're comfortable. You want to come to the mosque, the Shaitan is there. You want to learn, the Shaitan is there. He takes every path. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he continues on the tongue of Shaitan. ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. And I will come to them from in front of them, from behind them, from the right of them, from the left of them, and you will not find many of them thankful. Some of the scholars of tafsir, they mention different interpretations to this verse. What's it mean that the Shaitan's going to come from front, from behind, from the right, from the left, from every direction? Some of them said, he will make them adorn the dunya for them so that they cling onto the dunya. Others said, he will confuse them and he will make them doubt the hereafter. Some of them said that he will confuse them in regards to their priorities in this life. Rather than their concern being pleasing Allah, he will make their concern pleasing their desires. Others said that he will divert them from righteousness. And all of these meanings is correct. Ultimately, all of these are examples. And the message from this verse is that the Shaitan will not leave an avenue to divert you from the truth, to misguide you, except that he will take that means. And he will use that tool and means to misguide you. There's only one direction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not mention. And that is from above you. From above you. And that is because shaitan, he cannot stand and he cannot separate between you and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That link is always there. Shaitan cannot break that link. Now, if we were to summarize the types of evil that the shaitan calls towards, we would come to the conclusion that there are 6 types. That there are 6 types of evil that the shaitan calls towards. And these degrees of evil are sequential. Meaning the first is his ultimate goal, and if he cannot attain the first, then he will move on to the second, and so on. And every type of evil that you can think of ultimately falls under one of these 6. If you like, this is the plan or blueprints of shaitan. This is the plan or blueprints of shaitan. And he uses certain tricks and certain tools in order to execute this plan and achieve these goals. Now the tools and the tricks that the shaitan uses we will leave for next week, inshallah. We will discuss the tricks and tools that the shaitan uses for next week. This week we will discuss the master plan that involves these 6 types of evil. Now the first type of evil is the ultimate evil. And it is the greatest form of evil. And that is to commit disbelief. To commit kufr. The single sin that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forgive on the Day of Judgment. Every single sin that man commits, even if it is a major sin, is under the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah wills, He may forgive. If Allah wills, He may punish. Except for one sin. And that sin is to associate partners in the worship of Allah ta'ala. And it is the greatest of all sins. It is the greatest of all sins. And this is really the ultimate goal of shaitan. If the shaitan gets a human to commit this sin, to disbelieve in Allah, then he doesn't care less what comes after that. He's achieved his ultimate goal. He leaves you to do what you wish. As they say, there is no sin after the greatest of sins. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَمَثَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِذْ قَالَ لِلْإِنسَانِ كُفُرْ فَلَمَّا كَفَرْ قَالَ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّنْكَ. Like the example of shaitan when he commands man to commit disbelief. And when he commits disbelief, he says, I am free from you, for I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, subhanallah. The shaitan, once he gets you to commit the ultimate sin, he says, I'm free from you. I've got nothing to do with you. Why? Because I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not like you. Not like you. The Mufassirin, the scholars of tafsir, they mention an interesting story regarding this verse. And this is mentioned in many of the books of tafsir. Ibn Kathir mentions this story, Ibn Jarir mentions this story, Ibn al-Qayyim mentions this story. And it is the story of Barsisa. The story of Barsisa. Barsisa was one of the worshippers of Bani Israel. And he was known to be the most devout and righteous worshipper of his time. And the most devout worshipper of his village. And in this village where Barsisa lived and he worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this righteous servant, there lived 3 brothers. And these 3 brothers had a sister. And the call was made to battle and war. And so these 3 brothers, they prepared themselves to answer the call of battle. But they had the problem of their sister. Because they were the ones that were looking after and taking care of the sister. So they discussed amongst themselves, what are we to do with our sister before we go to battle? Eventually, they agreed that the most trustworthy man in the village to look after their sister was Barsisa, was the worshipper of Bani Israel. So they agreed. They agreed to try and leave the sister with Barsisa. So they went to Barsisa And they said, we have a sister and this is the case and we have to go and fight. And we do not trust anyone except you to look after her. But Barsisa, initially, he did not agree. He was reluctant to agree. He said, no, I cannot take on such a task. And they insisted once, twice, until eventually Barsisa agreed. Barsisa agreed. But on the condition that they build a house next to his place of worship. A separate house for her to live in. And they agreed. And they built her a specific house. And the brothers went to battle. Time went by. And the shaitan came to Barsisa. And he said to him, what harm will come to you if you prepared some food for this poor girl living alone, and placed this food in front of her doorstep and waited for her to take this food, because you don't know, maybe an animal may come and steal the food and eat the food. And Barsisa agreed. Obviously the shaitan came to him through a way of inspiration, through a way of whisper. And Barsisa placed the food in front of her door, and he did this once, twice, never looking at her, always lowering his gaze. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, until eventually he glanced at the woman. He glanced at the woman. And time went by. And the shaitan came to him and he said, what harm would come to you if you were to grab this food and also go into the house and offer her some company? The poor girl is alone. She's got no one to speak to. She's got no one to comfort her. And Barsisa agreed. And he took the next step. And he went inside the house. Now initially he didn't speak to her. But time went by. 1 visit, 2 visits, 3 visits. He began to speak to her. 4 visits, 5 visits, he began to touch her. And you can imagine where this is leading now. You can imagine where this is leading now. And keep in mind that this happened over a length of time, over a period of time. It wasn't sudden. The shaitan is very smart. And he's very patient. And he's not like you and me. We want things to happen now. We want victory now. We want to achieve things now. We want to become successful now. No, the shaitan doesn't think this way. The shaitan is very patient. And his process is gradual. His process is gradual. And he's got a long-term goal. He's got a long-term goal. And he's very careful in knowing exactly how to achieve his goal. He knows if he is to be very sudden, that he would not achieve his goal. That he needs to be subtle and he needs to be careful. And Allah describes this methodology in the Quran. The methodology of shaitan. وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. And do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. That's how shaitan works. Gradual, step by step methodology. Eventually he committed zina with this girl. And she fell pregnant. And she gave birth to a child of zina. And the shaitan came to him now. Now he's got a child that's born out of wedlock. And he said, what will you say when the brothers return and they see this child? What will you say to them? You will be exposed. And you are the worshipper. You are that righteous, devout worshipper that everyone knows. And he said, the shaitan said to him, you have to kill the child. You've got no choice. Otherwise you will be exposed. And so Barsisa killed the child. Time went by. The shaitan came back to him and he said, how about the woman that you committed zina with? Can you trust her to keep your secret? Obviously when the brothers come back, she's going to tell the brothers what happened. You've got no choice but to kill her as well. And so Barsisa killed the sister as well. Now the brothers returned from battle. And when they asked about their sister, when they inquired about their sister, what happened to their sister, Rasulullah said, she fell ill and she died. Time passed, the shaitan came to the three brothers in their dreams, and he informed their brothers of what Rasulullah committed. That he fornicated with your sister, that a child was born, that he killed the child and he killed the sister, and he is lying to you. And your sister and her child is buried in such and such place. So the three brothers confronted Barsisa, and they went to the grave and they commanded him to expose the grave and uncover the grave. And the grave was uncovered, and behold, their sister was there, and the remains of her child were also there. And Barsisa was exposed. He was exposed. So they took him and they crucified him. They crucified him. But before he died, the shaitan came to him in the form of a man. And he said to him, do you know who I am? Are you confused about who I am? I am the shaitan. I am the one who has caused you all this harm. I am the one who caused you to be in the predicament that you are in right now. I'm the one who made you commit zina. I'm the one who made you kill your child. I'm the one who made you kill the sister, and I am the only one who can save you today. But Rasulullah said, how? He said, I will save you on the one condition, that you disbelieve in Allah and you prostrate to me. But Rasulullah disbelieved in Allah and he prostrated to the shaitan. The shaitan then walked away and he said, Inni bari'un mink, inni akhafu Allah Rabbal Alameen. I am free from you, I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the worlds. This is how the shaitan operates. He operates in gradual steps. And this is the characteristic of shaitan. He comes to you as a friend, that he is looking out for your interests. And when you fall into his trap, he separates himself from you and he says, I have nothing to do with you. And I have nothing to do with your actions. Now, remember the verse, وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ, and do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. If shaitan was to come to Barsisa and tell him, disbelieve in Allah and prostrate to me, would he have done it? Absolutely not. If he told him commit zina, would he have done it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is a devout, righteous worshipper. However, he came to him in gradual steps. In gradual steps. And this is why, for example, with zina, the shaitan doesn't come to a believer and tells him, commit zina. Look at the haram. Look at naked women. No. Look at women on the street. Until you become desensitized from the women on the street. When you become numb and desensitized from looking at a woman on the street, looking at graphic images becomes a lot easier. These are the steps. He tempts you with the minor so that you can fall in the major. So that you can fall in the major. And this is why it said, نظرة فابتسامة فسلام فكلام فموعد فلقاء. It starts with a glance, and then it's a smile, and then it's a greeting, and then it's a chat, and then it's a meeting, and then it's an appointed meeting where you meet up face to face. And you know what happens after you meet. This is how the shaitan works. If you were to look at those who fell into shirk at the time of Nuh alayhi salam, they did not suddenly fall into shirk. It was a gradual process that went on for decades. The shaitan is long-sighted. He works for decades on his goals, for centuries on his goals. Those 5 pious men that are mentioned in Surah Nuh, the shaitan came to them, just make pictures so that they remind you of Allah, so that you can worship Allah. They made pictures and statues for that purpose. Then he told them to seek blessings from them, to venerate those pictures and statues. Until eventually, he told them, you are only seeking blessings from these statues and pictures, venerating them because your forefathers worshipped them, therefore worship them. And they began to worship those pictures and statues. The people of Lut alayhi salam, don't think they became sodomites overnight. It was a gradual process. First they began to free mix. Then they began to commit zina. And then the women began to become homosexuals. And then the men also began to do the same thing. This is how the shaitan works. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us, not from the goals, from the footsteps of shaitan. From the footsteps of shaitan. So this is the ultimate goal of shaitan, to make you disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now if he cannot reach this goal straight away, he moves on to the next degree. And what is the next degree? The next degree is innovations. Bid'ah. If he can't make you fall into disbelief, then he tries to make you to fall into innovations. Why innovations? And what's an innovation? An innovation is to innovate something in the religion, to make a means of worship that is not legislated in the Quran and Sunnah, and to use that means of worship that is not found in the Quran and Sunnah. To try and draw closer to Allah by means that are not legislated by Allah Ta'ala. This is what a bid'ah is. You know, some people like to play games sometimes. You tell them a certain thing is a bid'ah. They come to you, you're driving a car, bid'ah. That didn't exist during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Air conditioners. Are you saying air conditioners are bid'ah as well? No, that's not what we're saying. Absolutely not. Have air conditioning, inshallah. I drive a car. Well, what fool doesn't drive a car? We all drive cars. No one says it. A bid'ah is something in the religion. It's a means of drawing closer to Allah that the Prophet ﷺ and his companions were able to do but did not do. This is what a bid'ah is. This is the definition of a bid'ah. And then you may ask, why is a bid'ah more beloved to the shaitan than a major sin? Than a major sin. It is more beloved to the shaitan than a major sin because the one who performs innovations, he thinks he is doing good. He thinks he's doing good. He thinks he's drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When in reality, he is doing something that is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you commit a major sin, you feel that guilt. You feel the weight of that sin. And that makes you want to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for a bid'ah, no. Quite the opposite. You think you're doing something good, but in reality you are doing something evil. And innovations are different degrees. You know, some innovations may reach disbelief. There are people who call themselves Muslim that supplicate to the graves. They direct their supplication to a person in the grave. And they ask that person to relieve the burdens and calamities and hardships that they are encountering. That's no doubt an innovation, and it's no doubt a form of kufr. There are people who fear people in their graves because they are saints more than they fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They tell, don't speak about such and such a person in the grave because it will harm you. And that is no doubt a belief that is bid'ah, that is an innovation, and it is also a belief that is not only contrary to Islam, but it is kufr as well. Because it is diverting the worship that belongs only to Allah to other than Allah. This type of fear, the fear of harm, if you fear it from other than Allah, then that's a form of disbelief. And really, when you perform a bid'ah and you're happy with this bid'ah, there is an implicit accusation that the Prophet ﷺ fell short in delivering the message of Islam. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran tells us that this religion is complete. Islam is complete. There's no deficiency in the religion. When you innovate a matter in this religion a way to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you are accusing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam of not teaching you everything that you need, of not delivering the complete message of Islam. And this is why it's so serious. This is why it's so serious. You know, bid'ah are small, they're big. There's all types of bid'ah. You know, one bid'ah that's common, that you often see, is when people pronounce their niyyah, for example. And this is really, it's a small bid'ah. No one make takfir on someone who pronounces their niyyah. It's a small bid'ah. It's not a major bid'ah, but it's a bid'ah. It's an innovation. Person comes to the salat and they say, نويت أن أصلي صلاة الظهر حاضرا مأموما وراء الإمام. And they make that intention verbally. I am coming to pray the prayer of Dhuhr, 4 rak'at behind the Imam. And I will not be praying as the Imam, I'll be praying behind the Imam. And I'll be praying on time, not in a delayed time. The person has to ask, honestly. You're coming to pray, you've got no idea why you're praying, you really have to verbalize it. Because the intention's in the heart, the intention is in the heart. Verbalizing the intent, there's no need for it. And then you have to ask, did the Prophet ﷺ do this? And the answer is obvious, no, the Prophet ﷺ didn't do this. Did the companions do this? The answer is obvious, the companions didn't do this. Then why are you doing this? When you come to eat a bowl of cereal, imagine a person, they're about to eat and they're saying, I intend to eat this bowl of cereal that has milk and it's got cornflakes and it's got a bit of sugar. What do you think? What's wrong with this person? If you're not about to eat, what else are you doing with? Are you playing with the corn? What are you doing with the cornflakes? So verbalizing your intent, it's a bid'ah. But you know what the problem is? You know what makes a person fall into bid'ah? It's just their ignorance. They don't know any better. If you came to that person, you told him, brother, what are you saying these words for? You know exactly why you're praying. You know exactly why you're standing, inshallah. He'll tell you, Allah, maybe my father taught me this way. Your father taught you this way. Obviously, what's to blame? It's just ignorance. He doesn't know. He doesn't know any better. He does not know any better. That's the problem. And that's why the only cure is what? Is knowledge. The only cure and the only way to save yourself from falling into innovations is to learn the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to stick to that sunnah and follow that sunnah. Because his guidance is the best of guidance. And the worst of matters are the innovated matters. And every innovated matter is in the hellfire. One of the companions during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and interesting, none of the companions fell into bid'ah, One of these companions, he was walking one day on a mountain and he found a cave. And a thought came to his mind that, why don't I seclude myself in this cave and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That way the people are free from my harm and I am free from the people and I just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What a beautiful thought. Anything wrong with this way of thinking? Really, at the outside it seems pretty clear. It's something that's noble. But he said, I am not going to do this until I ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he asked him, what do you think about such and such idea, secluding myself in order to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a cave? And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam automatically responded and he said, إني لم أبعث بالرهبانية وإنما بعثت بالحنيفية السمحة. He said, I have not come with this type of mentality, this type of rahbana, monasticism, this type of a monk that secludes himself from all of society. That's got nothing to do with Islam. And that's not what Islam teaches at all. I have come with the true religion that is easygoing. Islam doesn't tell you to divorce the world completely. Islam tells you to divorce the world from your heart. But at the same time, you still need to work, you still need to provide. And that's part of Islam. That's part of what Islam teaches. All of the companions, they worked. They were men. They were real men. You know, today we have some people, wallahi, with obscure understanding of Islam. They think Islam is being on the dole and just going to the mosque, going for 3 months, or whatever it may be. And this is Islam. This is the understanding of Islam. And this is absolutely wrong. Yes, you need to go to the mosque. Yes, you need to learn. But at the same time, you need to provide for your family. You need to work. The companions worked, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. And they tried to make something of themselves. They tried to become strong. Because only a strong person can truly benefit Islam. They educated themselves. They became scholars. They became warriors. They became merchants. And they used what they had, the education they had, in order to give victory to Allah. And in order to give victory to Islam. And this is the way we need to be. The companions, they didn't fall into bid'ah because they knew they were slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They knew their master was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they knew that only Allah commands. And only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dictates of how He is to be worshipped. And so they would never move a foot. And they would never utter a word of worship unless it was legislated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger alayhi salatu wassalam. لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. Don't ever put a foot forward before Allah and His Messenger. You want to worship Allah, you learn how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to follow the sunnah, you learn what the sunnah is. And this is very important. This is very important that we need to educate ourselves so that we do not fall victim to the trap of shaitan and fall into innovations. Now, if the shaitan cannot get a person to fall into the innovations, he moves on to the third degree, the third level of evil, and that is al-kaba'ir, major sins. Major sins. And a major sin has been defined by the ulama as any type of sin that has come and attached to the sin is a threat by Allah, or the anger of Allah, or the punishment of Allah, or attached to it is the threat of hellfire, or there is a prescribed punishment for such a sin. Any such sin you can classify as a kabira, a major sin. And there are many ulama that have written books about the major sins in Islam. And they are called kaba'ir, major sins, because they are destructive. They have the potential to destroy your world and your akhirah very quickly. Very quickly. And that is why they are major sins. They are major sins in relation to the minor sins. Now, without giving examples to these major sins, if a person can abstain from the major sins, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him. And that's the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِن تَجْتَنِبُوا كَبَائِرَ مَا تُنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ نُكَفِّرْ عَنْكُمْ سَيِّئَاتِكُمْ. So long as you are a practicing Muslim, if you abstain from the major sins, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive your minor sins. And that's why often you read in the hadith tradition many acts of worship that expiate the sins. And what is referred to is these hadith refer to are the minor sins. For example, Jum'ah to Jum'ah is an expiation for the sins that are performed in between. What sins? The minor sins. When you perform wudu, with every drop of water, your sins are forgiven. When you wash your hands, the water that drops from your hands removes the sins that you committed, the minor sins that you committed with your hands. When you wash your face, those drops of water, they remove the sins that you committed with your face, your arms, your legs, and so on. These expiate your minor sins. As for your major sins, they require tawbah, as many of the ulama have explained. that they require tawbah, you need to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need to repent to Allah in order for those sins to be forgiven. If the shaitan is unable to trick you and trap you into falling into the major sins, he moves on to the fourth degree. That is minor sins, as-sagha'ir. And don't be fooled by the name. Sometimes people, they say, well, it's a minor sin. They understand it to be what? It's nothing major, we can do it. And sometimes I have some brothers come up to me, they say, smoking's bad, but it's not as bad as taking drugs, is it? It's not as bad as taking drugs, maybe, taking heroin, but before I answer the question, and a person who answers the question, the answer to the question is not important. The problem is in the thought process is the problem. The way you're thinking about it is a problem. The way you're rationalizing it in your mind is the problem. It's not about is this worse or that's worse. It's not about this is worse or that's worse. It's a saghira in relation to a kabira. But that doesn't mean it's just a small sin. That it doesn't have the potential to destroy you and to destroy your life and to destroy your akhirah. Absolutely not. It has the potential to destroy your lives and to destroy your akhirah. And that's why it said don't ever trivialize a sin. Because trivializing a sin is worse than the sin itself. Trivializing the sin is worse than committing the sin itself. Why? Because when you trivialize the minor sin, then the major sin becomes easier to take on. You've committed minor sin after minor sin after minor sin after minor sin. And these minor sins, they produce more sins. Sins produce more sins. They give birth to more sins. Until eventually you fall into the major sins. It said, لا تستهين بالصغيرة فإن الجبال من الحصى. Don't look down on a minor sin. Don't think it's a minor sin. And realize that mountains are made from pebbles. A large mountain is made from pebbles. Likewise, your minor sins may come together until they become major, until it becomes a major sin and it destroys you. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he warned us about the minor sins. He said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَمُحَقِّرَاتِ الذُّنُوبِ. Beware, be careful about what? About those sins that you look at as insignificant. Those sins that you belittle, that you think they're minor, you think they're nothing. And then the Prophet ﷺ gave an example. And he said about a group of people in the desert. Each one of them bringing a twig in order to form a fire. Each one's brought a twig until the fire is built. Likewise are the minor sins. They're like small twigs. And when they come together, they burn and they destroy. This is the way minor sins are. Don't look down upon minor sins. Don't belittle minor sins. And again, the story of Barsisa. It all started with what? Just a glance. It's just a look. It's just a chat. Wallahi, it's innocent, brother. It's innocent. And he's touching the girl and he's looking at the girl and he's saying, it's innocent. Wallahi, it may be innocent initially. In your heart, it's innocent. You don't mean anything by it. But you've opened the door to shaitan. It's like someone, he's playing with matches and he's dancing on a pool of petrol. And he's sitting, he's dancing with the fire in his hands. And I say, it's innocent, it's innocent. You're about to burn yourself, be careful. No, it's innocent. It's not innocent. Because it leads to more. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us to lower our glances. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam warns us about these minor sins. These sins that we look at as being nothing. And this is the way the believer is. He doesn't say, is this minor, is this major? He's concerned, is it a sin? Is it displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If it's displeasing to Allah, I know it can destroy me, I need to stay away from it. And that's why Ibn Mas'ud, he says the believer, He looks at his sins as if they are a mountain about to collapse on him. And as for the hypocrite, then he looks at his sins like a fly. It came to his face, and he told it, get away, get away. It's nothing, it's just a fly. You need to beware. You need to beware. And that's why it's said that sin is like a drop of poison. It can be catastrophic. It can destroy you. It can destroy you. The sin has the potential, brothers and sisters, even if it is insignificant, to destroy your marriage, destroy your employment, and it can even have the potential to destroy your iman. And that's why you need to be cautious. You need to be cautious of the footsteps of shaitan. You need to be cautious even from the minor sins. And sins have consequences, Sins have a price. There's always a price you pay. Don't ever think for a moment you've gotten away scot-free. Wallahi, you may see the consequences of your sin years afterwards. Years afterwards. Maybe you lose your house, you lose your job. You may sit in one day and scratch your head. What have I done to deserve this? Remember, Allah does not oppress a soul even in the most minimal way. Allah is the all-just. Any type of calamity that befalls you is from your own doing. It is from what your hands have sowed. It's from your own doing. Therefore, that response, the consequence may be delayed. But be sure, if you have not repented to Allah, it will come. Its day will come. And that's why we always say that the oppressors, the tyrants, will have their day. They will have their day in this dunya and in the akhirah. Because while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may delay, He does not forget. While He may delay, He does not forget. If the shaitan cannot make you fall into minor sins, and this is the 4th degree, he moves on to the 5th. And what is the 5th? التوسع في المباح. That he makes you occupied and busy with that which is permissible. And really, shaitan doesn't have to resort to such measures in most cases. In most cases, he succeeds in trapping the human in one of the first 4, or in a few of the first 4. However, if he cannot, then he tries his best in making you busy with that which is permissible, from that which is rewarding. From that which is rewarding. Work, 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 don't worry. Work 10 hours, work 12 hours, it's all good. He's not doing anything haram. He's not doing anything haram, he's working. He's a workaholic, mashallah, it's good. In order to buy the bigger house, the better car. There's nothing wrong with that, wallahi, nothing wrong with that. But why does the shaitan do this if you're a good Muslim, practicing Muslim? So he can stop you from doing that which is rewarding. From coming to the mosque, from listening to a lecture that is beneficial, from educating yourself, from learning the Quran, from spending time with your children. Yes, spending time with your children is part of being a good Muslim. Part of being a father, brothers and sisters, is teaching your children. Wallahi, your responsibility as a father is not just to provide shelter. Your duty, more than just providing shelter and providing food on the table, is to teach your children about Islam, to be strong Muslims. That's your responsibility. That's on your shoulders. That's on your shoulders. If you're not doing that, I won't say you've fallen into the mubah, you may have fallen into the haram. You may have fallen into the haram. Work for your dunya, but don't forget your akhirah, and not at the expense of your akhirah. So if the shaitan cannot get a person to fall into the haram, then he at least tries to occupy them with that which is halal, so that they cannot busy themselves with that which is rewarding. That which is rewarding. Why should I come to a class? Allah, I've worked all day, I'm too tired, I need to relax. That's what the shaitan comes to you and he says. Relax, put up your feet, akhi. You've done a good, hard day's work. MashaAllah. How many of the brothers here are Carlton supporters today? Raise your hand if you're a Carlton supporter. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. May Allah Ta'ala reward you immensely for coming today. Because today there's the finals, Carlton versus Essendon, 7:30. I told one of the brothers, are you coming to the class today, inshallah? Told me, no, I can't make it. Why can't you make it, brother? Told me, it's Carlton Essendon. I got, mashallah, jazakallah khair akhi, you've given me the perfect example for the 5th trap of the shaitan. The 5th degree of the shaitan. I'll be using that tonight, inshallah. May Allah Ta'ala reward you immensely for coming. Now, you've beaten shaitan at his game here. You've come to that which is better. And this is not an endorsement to say, watching AFL is good or bad. I'm not giving any fatwas about AFL. But at least you have come to a class that is more beneficial than watching AFL. And you have saved yourself from falling trap and victim to the shaitan at this degree, at this level. What is the final level? If the shaitan cannot get a person to occupy themselves with the mubah, and this is a very subtle trap. And the shaitan, very rarely does he have to resort to this type of subtle trap. It is al-ishtighalu bil-mafduli anil fadil. To occupy them with that which is good from that which is better. He occupies you with that which is good from that which is even better. And that's the final degree, the final evil that the shaitan strives to trap a Muslim in. He tries to busy you because he sees, mashallah, you're trying to do a lot of good. But he preoccupies you with that which is good from that which is better. So he'll come, and this is a lot of these examples, you've witnessed them if you have not gone through them anyway. You find the brother, he's so concerned. He's spending weeks on end, and even students of knowledge. Do I shake the finger? Do I keep the finger up? Do I, in the prayer, do I put my hands on my chest after ruku'? What do I do, brother? Wallahi, it's very confusing and weeks, and he's putting so much energy into researching, maybe if he's a student of knowledge. But you ask him, brother, do you know how to read the Quran yet? No, I don't know how to read the Quran. طيب, mashallah, wallahi, it's good that you're learning about these matters. And these matters are important. I'm not trying to trivialize these matters. They're important matters. But at the expense of learning how to recite the Quran? At the expense of learning what the Quran teaches you? Now, so many people are concerned, is this person a kafir? Is he not a kafir? Wallahi, maybe that's important. Maybe it is important. But in your everyday life, how important is it? How important is it? The brother's so concerned, beard, is it sunnah? What's going on with the beard, brother? Wallahi. And you find this brother, he's got bigger problems. He's got bigger problems. Identifying serious problems and rectifying them is important. It's important for us not to fall trapped to this subtle trap of shaitan. Subtle trap of shaitan. The problem, he's talking about the beard, is it sunnah or not sunnah? Maybe he's got a beard, mashallah, and he's lying, and he's cheating. And he's full of arrogance, he's full of pride. Every Muslim that walks past him, mashallah, because he's got a beard, he looks down upon them. And he belittles them. And that's a sin, that's a serious sin. And that's not part of being a Muslim. And he's concerned about, look at this da'i, he doesn't have a beard. Ya akhi, what's your concern? He doesn't have a beard. And he's doing so much more good than you. What's that say about you, akhi? What's that say about you? You're sitting there busy pointing the finger at this brother who's, mashallah, maybe he's donating so much of his wealth, and that's not to justify that sin. That he's not doing something wrong by not growing the beard. Maybe he's got an excuse, maybe he doesn't. Allahu a'lam. But to sit there, concentrate on that and criticize that, well, you've got major problems. Major problems. You're lying, you're cheating, your character, wallahi, people just have to speak to you and look at you and they want to run a mile away. And you're worried about this brother who's doing so much khair. And this probably doesn't even fall, some of these examples probably fall in the haram more than they do in busying yourself with that which is good from that which is better. Inshallah, next week is a very important discussion regarding the tools and the tricks that the shaitan uses in order to achieve and make people fall into this plan of his, into these evil degrees. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the evil of ourselves and from the evil of shaitan. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وجزاكم الله خيرا.